A mother grizzly bear, starving after a brutal winter, fought off a pack of coyotes to defend her two newborn cubs. Outnumbered, weak, and alone, no one thought she would survive the night, much less protect her young. But what happened next in that frozen valley stunned even the most experienced wildlife rangers. This is the true story of survival, instinct, and a moment that proved just how far a mother's love can go, even in the wildest corners of the earth. The winter had been merciless in the northern slopes of Glacier National Park. The snow didn't just fall, it swallowed. For months, the forest had gone silent beneath layers of ice. Elk herds migrated early, rivers froze too deep for fish, even the scavengers had thinned out, forced south by starvation. And in a shallow den carved beneath the roots of a wind-felled pine, a mother grizzly bear gave birth to twins. She was young, just past her first mating cycle, and smaller than most adult females. Rangers had tagged her 2 years prior and nicknamed her Runa, meaning strength in Old Norse. Strength, but not certainty, because the odds were stacked against her. She emerged in late March, ribs visible beneath her thick fur, eyes hollow from months of fasting. The cubs, barely the size of house cats, were too small to travel far. She'd need food soon. But there was nothing left in the snow, no berries, no carrion, not even dead fish in the shallows. So she roamed, half a mile, then 2, then 5, always returning by dusk, ears twitching, heart pounding, ready to fend off whatever had caught her scent. Because something always did. And on the 7th day, they came. It started as a sound, faint, sharp barks echoing between the trees. Runa froze mid-step just as she reached the ridge above the den. Her head turned slowly, downwind. Coyotes. Not one, not two, a pack. Their steps were coordinated, fast, and hungry. They had smelled something, weak, newborn, and they were right. Runa broke into a run, a full charging sprint, claws digging into the softening snow, muscles screaming in protest. When she reached the clearing, her cubs were pressed tight against the roots of the tree, whimpering, and 5 coyotes circled, sharp-eyed, salivating, one already lunging forward. She didn't hesitate. She roared. It wasn't a warning, it was a declaration. She was starving, wounded from the winter, but she was still a mother. And that meant something. The first coyote turned to meet her, bold, maybe desperate. She hit it mid-lunge, sending it sprawling into the snow, ribs cracking under her weight. Another tried from the left. She swiped, missed. A third bit deep into her hind leg. She twisted, roared again, and slammed backward with her full body, crushing it into a stump. The rest fled, one dragging a limp leg, another yelping, tail between its legs. Runa stood in the middle of the clearing, chest heaving, leg bleeding. But the cubs were alive, still tucked beneath the roots, still waiting for her. She limped to them and collapsed, curling her massive frame around their bodies, shielding them from the cold wind rising again through the trees. And she licked them softly, as if to say, not today. She didn't have strength left, but she had something stronger, the need to protect. And for now, that was enough. The morning after the fight, the forest was quiet, too quiet. Runa stirred beneath the roots of the pine, her body wrapped tightly around the cubs. Her fur was matted with dried blood. The wound on her rear leg was deep, torn open by coyote teeth. Every time she shifted, pain radiated through her flank. But she didn't cry, bears don't. She only grunted once, low in her chest, when one of the cubs, the smaller of the two, crawled over her shoulder, pressing its nose into the wound as if trying to understand. She licked its head gently and pulled it back to safety. They were all she had left. And now she couldn't hunt. She could barely walk. By mid-morning, the snow had begun to melt more rapidly, forming small streams that trickled along the roots of the trees. The forest smelled different, not cold anymore, but wet. Exposed. Runa knew that smell. It meant others would come. And she was right. That afternoon, something new crossed her territory. 2 male coyotes, survivors of the earlier attack, skulked through the trees a few hundred yards from the den. They didn't bark, didn't call. They were learning now from failure, watching, waiting. But they weren't alone. Something bigger followed, a bobcat, lean, cautious, silent as shadow. It didn't approach directly. It circled, marked, watched from the branches. Runa smelled it. She didn't rise, she couldn't, but she stood in her mind, watching, counting, remembering. Everything out here followed the same rule: weakness invites hunger. And right now, she couldn't afford to be seen as weak. So that night, bleeding and exhausted, she dragged herself out of the den, not to leave the cubs, never that, but to be seen. To show the scent markers. To walk her perimeter. To remind the world, I'm still here. Even if it nearly killed her. Somewhere across the ridge, a human walked the trails. He was a wildlife ranger, Daniel Rusk, 38, local to the region. He'd been tracking unusual coyote pack movements after reports of scavenging near empty dens. One pattern had caught his eye, a concentration of scent markings near a place no known wolves had nested. He chalked it up to elk carrion. But then he saw it, a paw print. Massive. Fresh. And another, smeared, limping, dragging behind. Bear. And not just any bear, a wounded mother. Daniel froze, heart racing. He knew what that meant. And in his gut, he felt it: she had cubs. She had fought. And she was likely dying. He didn't know it yet, but in 2 days, his path would cross hers, and what he'd do then would change both of their lives forever. She couldn't cry for help. But her blood left a trail. And for once, the forest would send someone not to take, but to answer. Daniel Rusk had been working in the park system for nearly 15 years. He'd seen bears, plenty of them. Tagged them, darted them, monitored den sites from a distance. But this felt different. The paw prints told a story. The larger print was heavy and deliberate. But one hind foot dragged irregularly, trailing through the soft mud like a signature of pain. That alone wasn't unusual. Many bears came out of hibernation injured. But what made him pause was what followed: tiny prints. 2 sets. He knelt beside them, not fresh, but not old. They walked close behind the larger prints, tucked in tightly. Cub behavior. He exhaled slowly. A wounded mother, 2 cubs, and likely very little to eat. He radioed in his coordinates but didn't call for backup. Not yet. Something about this trail felt like it required quiet. A mile away, Runa was licking her cubs clean. Her leg pulsed with pain, and her muscles burned with fever. Infection was setting in, slow but real. Still, she stayed alert. She heard the wind change, smelled something foreign. Man. Not the violent kind. Not hunter scent. No metal, no fire. But it was there, and it was getting closer. Daniel didn't press in. Instead, he sat right near the edge of a clearing where the den likely opened, close enough to observe, far enough not to provoke. And that's when he saw her, emerging just slightly, eyes fixed on him. She didn't roar, didn't charge. She simply looked. She was enormous, her fur darker than he expected, clumped with dried blood. Her breath came hard. Her head hung low, not submissive, but exhausted. Their eyes met, and in that moment Daniel didn't feel like the apex species. He felt like an intruder. She was protecting something. He could almost feel it, like a current in the air between them. Two small cubs peeked out behind her, their eyes wide, curious. Daniel lifted one hand slowly, not to wave, just to say, "I see you." And then he whispered, barely audible, "I'm not here to hurt you." Runa blinked, watched, then did something that shook him. She lay down, not fully, not with trust, but enough to let her cubs come forward and rest their paws on her face, curling into her neck. The message was clear, "I'm not going anywhere." Neither was he. For the next 2 hours, Daniel stayed where he was. He didn't move, didn't photograph, didn't reach for food. He simply existed, not as a ranger, not as a threat, as a witness. And when he finally stood to leave, he backed away slowly, never turning his back. Before disappearing into the trees, he whispered, "I'll be back." And from the den, Runa blinked once. Maybe she understood. Maybe she didn't. But for the first time in days, she didn't feel entirely alone. In a forest ruled by instinct, there was no handshake, no speech. Just two beings, broken by different things, recognizing something familiar in each other's eyes. Runa's fever worsened. The wound on her leg had grown swollen and warm. Each step sent tremors up her spine. She no longer roamed, not even the short radius around the den. The twins, now wobbling on stronger legs, began to crawl farther from her side, and she could no longer stop them. The snow had fully melted, and with it her silence broke into short, low groans, involuntary sounds that escaped when she shifted or when the smaller cub pawed at her side, confused by her stillness. She didn't mean to whimper, but her body was starting to give out. Daniel had returned every day, always from a distance, always with care. At first, he left no sign of his presence, just observed. But now he left food. First fish, hidden beneath a stone close enough for her to find. Then venison, roadkill reported from the nearby access road. He never saw her eat it, but each day when he returned, the food was gone. The cubs looked stronger, but Runa looked worse. She no longer met his eyes, no longer stood when she heard him coming. And when he found a patch of blood-streaked fur outside the den, freshly shed, he stopped pretending this would fix itself. She needed help, and fast. That night, he did what most wildlife officers never do. He brought his tranquilizer rifle. Not to tag. Not to remove. But to try something no protocol supported, stabilize her, treat the wound, and give her a chance. He didn't tell the station. They would say it was unsafe, that a wounded grizzly with cubs was too unpredictable. But Daniel had seen something in her eyes, and in the way the cubs leaned into her, unaware that she was losing the fight for them. He packed antibiotics, wound sealant, and a handheld radio on an open frequency, just in case. He also packed his resolve, because tomorrow he would move closer. He would enter the space he'd been so careful not to invade and try to do what nature had stopped doing for her, help. That night, Runa did something strange. She dragged herself, slowly, painfully, out of the den. Not far. Just enough to reach the small rise where she had first seen the man. And she sat, facing the forest, her cubs curled beneath her, and she stared into the trees, as if she knew something was coming, as if she was trying to tell the world, "I'm still trying. I'm still here." She had fought off predators, hunger, cold. But now the battle was inside her, and the only chance left was in the hands of someone who had every reason to walk away. Dawn came gray and still. The gorge was silent except for the occasional chatter of birds shaking frost from the pines. Daniel stood just inside the treeline, one knee on the damp moss, rifle in hand. The tranquilizer dart was loaded. He wasn't breathing through his mouth. His heart beat like a drum in his ears. The den was only 25 yards ahead. He could see her now. Runa was curled on her side, breathing heavily. Her fur was streaked with crusted mud and blood. One cub was nursing blindly. The other lay beside her, head resting on her forehead. She didn't rise, didn't flinch, and that told Daniel everything he needed to know. She wasn't just wounded. She was giving up. He aimed not at her heart, not at her face, but low at the muscle of her front shoulder. The dart hissed through the air. It struck clean. Runa jolted, tried to rise, but her legs folded beneath her. The cubs squeaked, startled, and ran behind her flank. Daniel ran fast, straight. He dropped the rifle the moment he reached her and slid to his knees. She was still conscious. Her eyes found him. No growl, just breath, heavy, labored. He knelt beside her massive body and whispered, "You're all right now. Let me try." The next 30 minutes were chaos wrapped in stillness. He cleaned the wound carefully with water and antiseptic. It was deeper than he feared. The infection had spread but hadn't yet gone systemic. He flushed the cut with antibiotics, sealed it with medicated salve, and bandaged it loosely with gauze designed for large mammals. The whole time, the cubs watched. They didn't run, didn't nip. They sat, eyes wide, ears twitching, as if somehow understanding this wasn't danger, this was mercy. He finished. He sat back, and only then did he start to shake, the adrenaline releasing like a wave. He stared at the bear he had just touched with bare hands, and the cubs still watching him. Then slowly, deliberately, he backed away, all the way to the treeline, and sat. He didn't leave. Not that night. By sundown, she stirred, weakly, but stronger. The medicine was working, and when she finally raised her head to scan the trees, Daniel was still there. Sitting. Still. Waiting. Not as a savior. Not as a scientist. Just there. And this time, when their eyes met again, she didn't look away. He had crossed a line no protocol allowed, and she allowed him to come back across it, not as a threat, but as the reason she might just survive. The next morning, the sky opened in streaks of pale gold. Daniel had barely slept. He sat curled against a tree trunk, wrapped in his jacket, binoculars resting on his chest. The cold gnawed at his legs, but he didn't move. Not while she still breathed. He checked the clearing with tired eyes, then froze. She was standing. Runa, the bear who had collapsed 2 days earlier, now stood on all fours. Unsteady. Wavering. But upright. The cubs circled her legs like shadows, yipping softly. She turned her head, licked each of them once. Daniel felt something press against his throat, a tightness that came not from fear, but from awe. She wasn't just surviving. She was returning. He didn't cheer. Didn't move. He just watched. And then, the unexpected happened. A noise cut through the trees, sharp, frantic. Coyotes. Again. 6 this time. They burst from the eastern slope in a flash of gray and hunger, bounding low through the snowmelt. Daniel leapt to his feet, instinct pulling him toward his rifle, but it was too far. Too fast. Too late. The coyotes reached the den's edge within seconds, circling like coordinated predators. Teeth bared, eyes locked on the cubs. And that's when Runa roared, louder than before. Not a cry of pain, but one of rage, of return. She charged. Daniel could barely track her. She moved like muscle and fury reborn. She hit the first coyote with full force, flipping it in the air like a rag. The others scattered, but she didn't stop. She swiped, snarled, thundered across the clearing, guarding the cubs with her entire body. 2 coyotes ran. 1 limped into the brush. And 3 stayed down, stunned, bleeding, or broken. The clearing fell silent. Daniel stood in awe, rifle lowered. She turned, panting, blood streaking her chest, not hers this time. The cubs rushed to her side, and she did something no textbook could prepare him for. She turned to face Daniel and sat, just for a second, eyes steady, chest heaving, but present. As if to say, I told you I could do it. Then she turned and led her cubs into the trees, not fast, not afraid, just away. Together. Alive. Daniel didn't follow. He didn't have to. The forest had given him something better than data. It had given him witness to pain, to courage, and to a moment he would never forget. She didn't just rise. She fought. She bled again, not out of desperation, but from strength. And in that moment, the wild didn't look savage. It looked sacred. Weeks passed. The snow melted into earth. Buds appeared on branches. Life returned to Glacier National Park in quiet waves of color and sound. But something in Daniel Rusk hadn't gone back to normal. He still did his ranger work, still patrolled the trails, still reported his sightings. But every time he crossed the stretch of forest where the den had once been, that hollow under the wind-felled pine, he stopped. He looked for signs, for paw prints, for cub tracks. But the earth was clean. No blood. No fur. No claw marks. Just grass. And silence. Still, he knew they were out there. She was out there. One morning in late spring, Daniel found something that stopped him cold. Near a bend in the river where salmon would soon spawn, a patch of soft mud held 3 small paw prints, not deep, not sharp, just present. 2 small, 1 large. And beside them, unmistakable, a drag mark. Faint but familiar. The same limp Runa had carried since the first attack. He knelt down and touched the earth, not to study it, not for data, but like one might touch the shoulder of an old friend. Then he stood and smiled. They had survived. Later that summer, a pair of hikers reported seeing a female grizzly with 2 cubs near the river's edge. The bear hadn't run. Hadn't charged. She'd watched, silent, still, then turned back into the trees. And as they left the area, one of the hikers looked down and saw something scratched into the mud where she'd stood, 2 wide claw marks side by side. Like a signature. Daniel didn't need photos to believe it. He already knew the truth. She lived. They grew. And somewhere in a corner of the forest that belonged only to them, a family still walked together. That fall, he gave a talk to a group of school kids on a field trip. They asked him if bears could be brave. He paused, then said, "Brave doesn't always mean strong. Sometimes it means bleeding for what you love, and getting back up even when you shouldn't be able to." And as the kids clapped, he felt something deep inside settle, not closure, but gratitude. For having seen something that few ever would. And never forgetting it. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who believes a mother's love can fight off anything, even nature itself. Because sometimes, survival isn't the end of the story.